So I bought Versace Eros Flame some time ago, but I've never done a review of it. And since I've had quite a few asking for a review of it, I thought it was time for me to share my thoughts on what it smells like, usage, performance and more. I will also do a quick comparison of Versace Eros Flame and the other Eros fragrances, but make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on my upcoming full comparison. Before I begin, a like on this video is highly appreciated, thank you, and make sure you subscribe. Let's take a look at the notes. Some of the notes in Versace Eros Flame are mandarin orange, pepper, lemon, chinotto, rosemary, geranium, rose, pepperwood, vanilla, tonka bean, sandalwood, cedar, patchouli and oak moss. I'm gonna get to mass appeal, usage and more, but let's start with what it smells like. So as soon as you spray it on, it's fresh, intensely fresh. At first quite intensely bright, but that changes quite quickly into a more sort of a smooth citrusy freshness. What I like about that initial dose of freshness is that it's a nuanced one. There's a bit of soft bitterness to it, there's a bit of green freshness to it, and also a bit of sweetness. There are layers to its freshness for sure. Within a minute or two, you get an added dose of spicy and aromatic freshness, and the whole thing stays intensely fresh for a while. So a recap of the opening: intensely citrusy and aromatic fresh with a bit of spiciness. The more it heads into the mids, the smoother the whole thing gets and the less intensely fresh it is. Both the vanilla and the tonka are listed as base notes, but to me at least, that part of it comes through already in the mids. There's a bit of sweetness to it as well, and I know some feel that Versace Eros Flame is insanely sweet, but to me, its sweetness is not that intense. So a recap of the mids: its freshness gets less intense and smoother, and it changes into a mix of smooth freshness and vanilla that's slightly sweet. As Eros Flame goes into the dry down, the whole thing is pretty much dominated by vanilla that's balanced up by a bit of woodiness. A smooth mix of vanilla and woodiness that's slightly sweet and slightly warm. So a recap of the dry down: mostly vanilla with a bit of woodiness. What I think is cool about Versace Eros Flame is the contrast between that intense sort of a freshness in the opening and the slightly sort of a warm vanilla dry down. A lot of fragrances have a bit of freshness in the opening that usually sort of a quickly wears off, but this is intensely fresh and more sort of a nuanced kind of freshness that actually stays quite a while. And the vanilla at the base smells good for sure. So a quick Eros comparison: Versace Eros EDT is all about vanilla with a fab dose of mint, fruitiness, and it's sweet. It's a sexy, fun and flirty scent. Eros EDT goes in a different, less intense and less nuanced direction with its freshness, and it's instead more fruity and sweet. Versace Eros the Eau de Parfum is less sweet and more balanced than both Versace Eros Flame and the OG EDT. It's got a citrusy and aromatic freshness that's balanced up by woodiness, vanilla and fruitiness. Eros Parfum in a way smells like a stripped down version of the Eau de Parfum, and it does not have the same sort of intense sweetness and fruitiness of the OG. It's also a lighter and more sort of a green kind of scent. It has a different and less intense kind of freshness compared to Flame and feels less intensely vanillic as well. Eros Flame, to me at least, is the spiciest of them all, and it's also the one with the most sort of an intense and nuanced dose of citrusy freshness. It still has that sort of an Eros vibe with that signature Eros vanilla, but it's a bit different for sure. So let's talk a bit about the vibe of Versace Eros Flame. This is all about a fun, flirty and playful vibe for sure. So let's talk a bit about compliments and mass appeal. Versace Eros Flame is much like the others, an extremely mass appealing scent. It's a compliment getting much like the others, but the dry down is definitely more likable than the opening. So when it comes to performance, I feel Eros Flame sort of a performance like the others in the line. It definitely has solid projection for the first few hours, and it does stay quite a while on my skin. I know some get beast mode like performance out of Eros Flame, but I do not think Eros Flame is a beast mode room filler. So let's talk a bit about usage. So Eros Flame is essentially primarily two things: intensely fresh and all about vanilla with a bit of woodiness that's slightly warm. I know a lot of people feel you can't use any of the Eros fragrances during summer, but I think you can. While it's not a freshie through and through, it does have a big dose of freshness to it, and the dry down of it is not too deep or too heavy. So when it comes to seasons, I feel Eros Flame can be used throughout the year. As for occasions, whenever you want something fun, flirty and sexy on you. Date nights and going out for sure. So who's Versace Eros Flame for? Since the focus is on intense freshness in the opening and a more vanillic dry down, I feel you should probably enjoy both those things in order to enjoy Eros Flame. Definitely stay away if you don't enjoy citrus in fragrances, and definitely stay away if you don't enjoy vanilla in fragrances. If you are looking for something that's 100% a freshie, then this ain't it. And the same thing goes if you are looking for something something that is extremely deep, heavy and warm, I don't feel this is such a scent. If you love the scent of vanilla and usually enjoy sort of a citrusy freshness in fragrances, then I feel you will most likely enjoy this. So let's talk a bit about some of the alternatives to Eros Flame. My main alternatives are pretty much going to be Eros, the EDT, the Eau de Parfum and the Parfum. Please go back to my comparison earlier in this video for more on them all. They are not exactly the same, but parts of the Eros DNA is in Flame for sure, and they all have their slightly different nuances and variations. But I do want to mention two other fragrances that are not the same, but both of them are a mix of freshness and vanilla with a bit of woodiness. Azarochrome opens up bright and citrusy fresh and changes into a mix of freshness, sweetness, vanilla and woodiness with a bit of orange blossom. Freshness, creamy vanilla and everything being a bit sweet and woody. Not the same, but an alternative with a similar fun and sexy vibe. The next alternative is Chanel Allure Sport O Extreme. O Extreme is a mix of freshness and sweetness with vanilla and a bit of woodiness. The vanilla is not the same and it puts more focus on woodiness than freshness, but it's a very sexy and flirty men's fragrance that smells great. None of these are exactly the same. The Eros alternatives are definitely the closest ones, so the price for 50ml can range anywhere from 40 to 80 bucks. So like always, make sure to have a look around if you're looking to buy it, and definitely make sure you wait for this to hit sales or check on discounters. So how am I going to rate Versace Eros Flame? So I always liked Versace Eros Flame. It does have that sort of Eros DNA in it, but with a twist. And it's pretty much all about intense citrus mixed with vanilla. While I do like the nuanced freshness in the opening, I do think that the vanillic dry down is my favorite part. Versace Eros Flame gets 7.5 or 8 from me, somewhere around that. So I would absolutely love to know how you feel about Versace Eros Flame and how you would rank it from 1 to 10.